I should say good morning or afternoon.
It's exactly noon.
Noon, okay. So first, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to talk to this distinguished audience.
Uh-oh.
Can't hear you, Salima?
Yeah, we can't hear Salima. Uh-oh.
Text her.
Let me see, is she? So, is she still?
She's here. She's trying to connect back, I think.
Can you hear me, Raquel?
Yes, very good. Digital gaps. So because Salima is giving the overview.
Maybe you can try without the presentation. I think it may be overloading the.
Let me try. I'll stop sharing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
If it freezes again, I will stop sharing.
Okay, that's fine. So I'll just say that I'm thanking you for the opportunity to talk to you today about the implementation status of the Government Resolution 922. And go to the next slide, Leron, please. I'm going to give a quick brief about the 922 Government Resolution and address the current implementation status, talk to you about main obstacles, main achievements, and also about the extension that happened a few weeks ago, and also some words about the next 5-year plan. Next, please. So I assume that most of you know about the 922, the famous 922 government resolution, but for those who don't, I'm just gonna say a few words about it. It's a 5-year plan aimed to economic development of the Arab society between the years 2016 and 2020. The total budget of the government resolution is 10.7 billion shekels, where almost half of it go for physical infrastructure, like planning, housing, transportation infrastructures, and so. About 1 billion for employment and economy, about 2 billion for education and higher education, 1.4 billion for empowering municipalities, and less than 1 billion for society and the community. It's a 15 ministries program, 58 local authorities. And I would say that the great news about 922 is the change in the budgeting mechanisms of ministries, so that the rate of allocation to the Arab minority will match the rate in the population, and sometimes even exceed that rate until the closing of gaps. And why I think that this is the great news about 922, because this is the sustainable thing that does not actually depend on extra money from the Ministry of Finance every year, but actually having it built in the budgeting mechanisms. And the second point, which is important about this program, is that it actually addresses and puts emphasis on main topics like municipal empowerment, planning, housing, formal and informal education. Next. As for the implementation status, since 2016 until mid-2020, 7.7 billion shekels have been allocated, and the distribution is detailed actually in the pie chart at the left. And I'm quite sure that you are interested in the budget execution and not only in the actual allocation. So I would say that it stands at 47.6%. So from the 7.7 billion shekels that have been allocated, only half were actually executed, so that the money was utilized. And we have here some explanations for this gap. First, I would say that it's about data. We do not always have the complete data from the reports of the ministries. Sometimes some sections are missing, and we believe that the actual execution rate is higher than 47%. And the other explanation that I'm gonna enhance on that also at the next slide, it's about the long processes of execution. And we have a very close monitoring about each and every one of the projects that are budgeted in this program. And we can see that many projects are actually making very nice progress, but still they are not mature enough to for the local authorities to go and submit the accounts and withdraw the budget. And that's why we stand at relatively a low percentage of execution. Next, please. So the implementation of the 92 government resolution budgets and projects is actually met with several obstacles. We have in each and every field its own unique set of obstacles, but I'm going to go through the general and cross-field obstacles that we can actually we meet in almost every field. The first category is about the issues of lands and planning. The scarcity of available government lands in Arab towns is a big obstacle in almost every domain. Definitely when we talk about infrastructures, the municipalities are forced to deal with the private lands in their territories in order to advance important projects. Municipalities go through very long planning procedures, taking up a long time prior to the start of the project. And these procedures actually include all the issues of completing the municipal master plans, locating public land, preparing detailed planning, changing the land designation, acquiring building permits, and dealing with citizens' objections. And after all that, they can actually start with executing their projects. And we can definitely see that this issue makes it difficult for the local authorities, and it also makes the processes be longer and longer. The second category of obstacles from our point of view is about budget issues. in light of the complexity of projects and large budget estimation, the municipalities are required to obtain budgeting from number of sources, sometimes several ministries, banks, and other sources. And this process of pooling can delay the start of the project, especially as the ministries do not approve their budget until the municipality has pooled the required budgets. We have projects that are budgeted through 922, and the local authority actually has not yet completed the pooling, and we can see that these projects are actually waiting to get the whole budget. And the lack of municipal income is also a great issue, and over-dependence on government budgets, which can be an obstacle in the projects that require matching, such as daycare centers, informal education, and more. Next, please. And despite all that, we can see some achievements in 922 and making a change in several areas of life of the Arab population. If we look at the higher education, we can see an increase of the involvement and participation of our population in higher education, and even exceeding the goals that were set for 2021. That is due to the investment of more than 550 million shekels in these past 5 years. In informal education, we call it the revolution. It's actually the yearly budgeting of 130 million shekels for local authorities that improved and increased the number of youth involvement in informal activities, which did not exist beforehand. And we can see the numbers at the graph where we actually increased the number of children and youth from 42,000 in 2016 to 125,000 in 2020. Next, please. And some examples from the domain of physical infrastructures. The change can be seen in several related topics. For example, in sewage connectivity, it's a dramatic increase on the percentage of connectivity to sewage in Arab towns from 35% in 2016 to 90% at the end of 2019. Also in public transportation, there was an average yearly allocation of 100 million shekels that improved the quality of public transportation. We actually almost doubled the number of weekly drives of bus lines that serve the Arab population from 35,000 in 2016 to 62,000 in 2020. And also we actually have now services, public transportation services in towns that didn't have it before, and we are increasing every year the number of towns that have services of public transportation. Next, please. And as you know, this is the last year of 922, and I would say that considering the government situation and the fact that there's no approved budget, and also the COVID-19 crisis, we decided that the right thing to do is actually to extend 922 to 2021, and that happened on the 25th of October. And the main goal of the extension, it's actually 2 extensions. The first is for a 922 government resolution, and the second is for another government resolution that we worked on 1480, it's addressing the Bedouin local authorities at the north. And the main goal of the extensions is actually to allow the local authorities to include that were included in these two government resolutions to utilize the already allocated budgets. The second thing is to allow the ministries to allocate the budgets that were not allocated, actually the reserves. The third point is about preservation of the budget mechanisms and the allocation rates that were set in the original 922 government resolution. The fourth, that is not less important, is about actually overcoming the barriers, mainly in the domain of housing, the barriers that actually prevented us and the local authorities from using the budgets. And the fifth point is actually that this extension instructs the Ministry of Social Equality to formulate the new 5-year plan for the Arab minority. If we want to give a brief about the budget, so we are talking about these 4 billion shekels that were allocated and not yet utilized. We have the 3 billion shekels that were not allocated at all, and we have an estimation of the budgets to be allocated through the mechanisms and to the allocating mechanisms and rates that is estimated by 1,070 1,750 million shekels for 2021. Next, please. As instructed in this extension, the next year will be devoted to the preparation and formulation of the holistic inclusive government resolution. The Ministry of Social Equality will formulate the government resolution that will include the same domains as in Government Resolution 922, and also attempt to expand it to include domains that were not covered by this resolution, like mixed cities, classroom construction, health, employment plans, crime and violence eradication, tourism, culture, welfare, and maybe more areas. And the guiding principles for constructing the next government resolution is about first mapping the needs and adapting the government plan to the needs of the Arab local authorities and the Arab population, resolving obstacles. Now we are much wiser than we were in 2015. We're actually going to analyze the main obstacles in terms of budgeting and implementation, and provide the proper tools to overcome these obstacles. Cooperation is actually a game changer. We're talking about increasing the involvement of the Arab local authorities and the third sector, experts, academia, and the public also in formulating the next resolution. And last is the capacity building in the local authorities, developing sustainable municipal capabilities, and preserving existing expertise and knowledge. That's all.
Thank you so much. I didn't know it could be done. It's so coherently such an overview, but this really covered so much content in a very concise manner. I want to open it up for 1 or 2 questions from the room right now over chat or live. You should have the PowerPoint now in your email. And then we'll have more time for questions at the end because we have 2 more speakers coming. So are there any questions right now? Harold, please unmute yourself.
Thanks. That was really helpful. If we're going to expand the number of areas that a 923 would cover, would it be reasonable to assume that the allocation of funds would also increase proportionately, or are we talking about adding more areas but not increasing the funds sufficiently?
Definitely, we're planning on increasing the funds. And that's, I can give 2 examples for that. In the health area, we have already a program that is almost set and formulated. And we're in the few next weeks, we're gonna go with that to the Minister of Finance in order to get the funds needed for that. And the same for the same thing actually for the program of crime and violence eradication. We have already a plan, and every single field that is gonna be included will get the funds needed and the budgets needed to actually address that.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Salima. May I add a question? Thank you very much. This is very helpful. My question regards the underuse of and under implementation of the budget. Do we also see a difference between underuse in regard of North and South regional councils in Arab towns in Israel? As the application in the South was made through the Ministry of Agriculture originally, and the implementation and the application process was a bit different. Is this also a component? Do we see a difference in regard of the different regions in the country in this regard?
Well, actually, we deal with the local authorities from the triangle area up to north. The south communities are not actually under our responsibility at the Ministry of Social Equality. But for your question, I would say that we see different levels of implementation, not definitely by regions, but by different, I would say, different local authorities. Okay, there's a wide actually spectrum of local authorities performance that definitely affects the implementation in each and every one, and not by region, but by maybe the capabilities of each local authority.
If there's no, Batya, you have a burning question for Salima, because I want to ask all the speakers. We have 2 more speakers. I want to ask them to also go, and then we'll have additional time for Q&A. But Batya, if it's quick, please.
I was wondering if the new plan addresses the challenge of matching government matching requirements on certain aspects of government funding, and if there are strategies for how to shift those requirements or increase revenues for the municipalities.
Well, I don't have an accurate answer for that right now. We know about this actually obstacle, but it's not easy with the Ministry of Finance, where they always want the even the little bit of maybe proving responsibility from the local authorities. It's not going to be easy, but it's definitely one of the topics that is being actually, we're thinking of it, and we're trying to find the solutions for this issue.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to please hold, and we'll move on to the next speakers, and hopefully we'll have time for a discussion and Q&A for everyone at the end. So Mudir Younis, thank you. I'm so glad you could make it. If you can please, as chairman of the National Council of Arab Mayors, the National Council is on the steering and the GR-922 steering committee and has accompanied the process. And over the last couple of years, you've put great effort into planning for the next multi-year plan and eventually for advocating for this one-year extension. Now that the extension is here, as well as a commitment for making a next plan, can you share a little bit about your reflections about this moment and how the council looks to use 2021?
Well, I want to make a little bit of history, please. Sorry, I'm talking from the cell phone because I'm at Knesset and I couldn't find the computer. The members of the Knesset promised me to get me a computer and they didn't. So I'm talking from the cell phone. I hope that I'm clear. Before 6-7 years, a few of the Arab mayors met and they start talking about that we have to advocate for budgets for the Arab community and our municipalities. The discrimination was for a long time, a lot of years, from the government to the Arab community and the municipalities, and it still goes until now. So we started to talk about a plan from of the Arab community and Arab municipalities, and we made not a plan, we can say some kind of suggestion, and we talked about 72 billion shekels. And when we came to the Minister of Finance, we found that they already have a plan of their on themselves. This is 922, and that's how we started. Of course, it was a plan, and in order to make changes, it was very difficult to make these changes. We saw that there is a problem with this plan. But after a long time of discussions, and we succeeded to make some improvements in this suggestion, in this plan, the government approved the plan 922. I think the most important thing in the plan 922 is that the government acknowledged that there was a discrimination towards the Arab community in Israel. And by this acknowledge, we could pledge for the budgets and make the changing in our community and get more budgets for our councils. The problem was that we saw before 5 years, sorry, we saw that there is a problems with some suggestions in this plan. We saw that the condition they put in housing, for example, we couldn't achieve it, and therefore the budgets wouldn't get finally to the Arab community or the Arab municipalities. And they tried to persuade them that we are going to get to this point. We didn't succeed, unfortunately. And right now, when we came to the end of 922, the government saw that we were right. And therefore, they start to talking not about the new plan, unfortunately. They talk about the extension in order that the budgets that they put it in 922, we can succeed to achieve and get it and allocate it to the Arab community and to Arab municipalities. The extension is good, but we see it as also a loss. Instead of talking about the new plan after 922, we are talking about extension, and we are losing 1 year. Of course, we have, unfortunately, the corona. We have also the unstable government in Israel. We are talking now as Arab community leaders. that we are going to extension, but yet we are pledging for the other thing in order also to get the other start to the other plan for the next 5 years. Salima talked about everything almost, so I only want to talk about 3-4 things that we are talking. We're talking right now about. Right now, I'm in the Knesset. I was with the Knesset members, Arab Knesset members of the in the chairman of the Knesset, and we talked about the problem of the violence in the Arab community. The government have decided before almost 1 year to make a decision or make a plan to try to not to end, but to reduce the violence in the Arab community. I'm talking to you, and just yesterday we heard about the killing of the woman in Arabi, and this scene is, we are seeing it almost, I can't say every day, but in some way or another, violence every day in the Arab community. So we are talking about hope, we are talking about culture, we are talking about finance, we are talking about a lot of things, how to make better things for the Arab community, and still we are talking about violence that ends these hopes. So we are talking about this plan. We are talking about a plan in high-tech that the Arab Arab committee of the mayors have make a very good plan for high-tech, how to get the high-tech in the Arab community, in the Arab municipalities, in our villages. We are talking about the health. We are with Corona, and we know what's happening in the health in the Arab community. It's far, far away from Israel. If we're talking about Israel, if we can say there is good health in Israel, good planned health, the Arab is far, far away from that. So these things, we didn't have it in 922. And right now we see that we think that it's our duty to talk about it and also to make the extension for the other things that was in 922. If we're talking about planning, housing, everything, so we need to extend these budgets for these things and also add another budgets for the other things that we couldn't talk about it in 922 because we have this plan that this is the plan. Are we talking? We are going with this plan. We can't make another plan or add for this plan. So right now at the Arab Municipalities Commission, we are working about the new plan for after 922. We have the NGOs. We have also, of course, the Arab mayors. We have experts, and we're trying to make a plan that when we come to the Minister of Finance, we are not talking about the plan of the government. We say that this is our plan. We pledge for our plan, and we seek to get budgets for this. Because we believe, and what happened in 922, of course, there was a lot of obstacles, but yet when we're talking about a plan that the Arab mayors and the Arab leaders came and say, it's not our plan, okay, but we think it's a good plan, it's a good start, we could achieve a lot of things in our villages. For example, if I'm talking about my village, Arana, we are talking about a lack of master plan and detailed plan for housing. We are talking about a lack of more than 30 years. We are talking about 2,000 houses without a license. And we were talking about without a license that they couldn't have a license because there is no a master plan and a detailed plan. What does that mean? We have a lot of houses without a license. We have the problems of demolition of these houses. We have the problem that we have a lack of public lands, for example, in order to build schools and etc., etc. Right now, we believe that because of the working of the Arab mayors, because that we believe that we can make the change, and we can plead for our rights, because it's our rights. It's not, when we're talking about the government, we do not come and say for the government, please give me. Right now we say it's our right and we want it, and therefore we believe we can succeed. Because of the corona, the situation is very difficult right now, but still we think it's our duty and our right to ask, and we believe we can achieve it, because there is a meet of interest between the Arab community and the Israeli government. Why? Because the Israeli government, of course, they acknowledge the discrimination, but more and more, they believe right now that the Arab community is about 20%, and in order to make it better for the economy of Israel, we need this 20%, not poor and not weak. We have to strengthen this community in order to strengthen also the economy of Israel. This is my summary, because Salima talked a lot of things, and the extension, it was not easy. The extension, or the decision of extension, they wanted only to make extension, but we believe that if you make the extension, after 1 year, we will be at the same place, because there was obstacles and conditions that the Arab municipalities couldn't couldn't achieve. And now by extension and the changing of the decision of extension, we believe that all the budgets, maybe not all, but we hope all the budgets, we will get it, and we allocate, and we will succeed to achieve. And yet we are also talking right now, not after 1 year, not after 2 years. Right now we are talking about the new plan for the Arab community, the next 5 years plan.
Thank you so much. I just shared a couple of months ago, we produced a very brief summary of a lot of the proposals that Mudir discussed that the National Council have been coordinating for the next multi-year plan. And I hope that we'll have time over 2021 to catch up with you and the developers of the proposals to look at the various areas that very specific plans that are being suggested for the next plan, of course, in coordination with the Authority for Economic Development. Are there 1 or 2 questions for Mudir before we go specifically into the amendments with Ofer? Any questions? Okay, Mudir, thank you. Please stay on for the Q&A at the end. We'll hopefully be able to round it out with a discussion. Ofer, I'm delighted to invite you, Co-Executive Director of Sikkuy. I know you've been tracking the extension and the amendments very, very closely and have insights. There were amendments included with the extension related to housing and public transportation that I hope you will explain to us what the significance is for implementation in 2021.
Yes, so thank you, Luron. Hello, everyone. It's very nice to see you and talk to you, and thank you for the invitation to speak here. As you know, Sikkuy over the last 5 years was very much involved in promoting the implementation of 922, and also over the last year, together with the National Committee of Arab Mayors and other NGOs in developing the follow-up plan for 922. And we think that the extension of 922 that was approved in the government a few weeks ago is a very essential step towards the continue of the current trend. We also, I agree with what Salima said in the beginning, that it wasn't taken for granted that it will happen, given the current political and financial climate in Israel. We were a bit worried for a time until it finally happened. And I would like, in the short time I have, to go over 5 insights that we have about the extension of 922. What is called the government decision 468. This is the number of the government decision of the extension. 4 of them are bright spots of the extension, and 1 of them is also a problem that was created on our view in the extension. and to look a little bit to the future and to the following year. So the first, and I would say that some of the points that I mentioned, Salima and Mudir already mentioned them, and maybe I will get a little bit into more detail about them. The first point is that the new government decision enables the allocation of old money, that around 3 billion shekels out of the 10 billion that was included in the original 922 plan, and that hadn't been allocated in the first 5 years of the implementation. And this is good news, because otherwise this money could be spent on other purposes in regard with the decision of that or other minister political will. So this is good news. The second point is that it enables the allocation of new money, around 1.7 billion shekel, that constitutes allocation of the different budget mechanisms of 922 in the sixth year of implementation, the year 2021. Just to clarify, for example, if 922 states that each year out of the national budget for construction of daycare centers, 25% will be allocated for our local authorities, and that already took place in each of the last 5 years, then also in 2021, 25% of this budget will go to Arab local authorities. And this is the case for around 15 budget mechanisms that are included in 922 in fields such as employer subsidized, support for a small business, transportation infrastructures, and other fields. So this is also very good news, because it means that the pace of closing the allocation gaps in this field will continue to move forward, at least at the allocation level. The third point, and this is a problem that we see that the extension caused, is that it created a problem in the field of public transportation, and I will explain. In this field of public transportation services, 922 declares that each year Arab local authorities will get 40% of the national budget for operating new bus lines, or 100 million shekels, the higher of the two options. And so far, over the last 5 years, it was eventually 100 million shekels that was allocated, because that was the higher figure. And it eventually it helped to improve, as Salima showed us the results, it helped to improve the public transportation between Arabs and Jewish municipalities, but still there is a big gap in the scope and in the quality of the services between Arab and Jewish cities and towns. And in the new government decision, 468, the government decision that extends 922 to 2021, it says that in the field of new public transportation bus line in 2021, the allocation for Arab local authorities will be 40% of the national budget and not 100 million shekels. And our estimations is that as a consequence, the allocation for public transportation in Arab local authorities in 2021 will be reduced in comparison to what's happened over the last 5 years. And therefore, the consequence is that the pace of closing the gaps in this field will be slower. The gap will still be closed because 40% of the budget is still higher percentage than the population, but it will, according to our estimation, it will be less than what happened in the over the last 5 years. And it means that we have to struggle that the allocation in this field will be raised again in the follow-up plan to 922 in 923. And this is a goal for the upcoming year. the fourth point, and this is again a bright spot, is that the decision fixed two distortions in the budget allocation that was included in 922 housing chapter. Mudir also mentioned it, and also Salima. And those distortions prevented from many of the budgets in this field to be allocated, especially for the 15 big Arab local authorities that are included in the strategic agreements with the government. And what was the distortion that was in 922 was that it made some preconditions to receive the money that was hard to meet by the Arab local authorities, also almost impossible to meet in some cases. And the new decision make those preconditions, some of them, easier to meet. And therefore, it enable more authorities to get more money for purposes of planning new neighborhood and also legalize unauthorized housing. And this is something that we in Sikkuy, together with National Committee of Arab Mayors and together with ACAP, also we pushed very hard over the past few years, and we are glad that it was finally approved by the government, because this change required a government decision in order to change it, and we're glad that it finally happened. Although still in this field of housing and planning, there are several other barriers, professional barriers, that also make hardship on the implementation process. And this is another thing that we have as a challenge to encounter over the upcoming years, to solve more and more barriers in the field of planning and housing. Some of the barriers were solved over the last 5 years. Some of them were solved now in this new government decision, but there are still some other that needs to be solved, and we're working on that as well. The last point is that the new government decision includes a clause that guides the government ministries to develop a follow-up plan and to bring it to the approval of the government. Also, Mudir and Salima mentioned it, and I think it's very significant, because it's the first formal obligation of the government to prepare a follow-up plan. We heard informal talking and preparation of a follow-up plan, but it's the first time the government says in a very loud and clear voice, there is a need to develop a follow-up plan for 922. And we heard from Salima that the plan is designed to be wider, and we also think it should be wider. And maybe for an end, I will give a little bit historical perspective on the policy processes that created 922. The previous I would say that the process that we see now is very similar to the process that happened when the previous 5-year plan was ended, because the previous 5-year plan ended in 2014, and then it was extended for 1 additional year in a government decision, and the same government decision also guided the government to develop a follow-up plan that was eventually 922. So we see a similar pattern here, and this, on one hand, give a place for optimism that indeed the follow-up plan will be wider and more thorough, but also it's slightly worried because we see a similar pattern that the government doesn't succeed to implement the 5-year plan within 5 years. This is I will end here and leave more time for questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very thorough and a lot of specific points. I want to see, I see one question from Iran. I want to know if there's any question from the room. Raise hands. And yes, Alan.
Yeah, this is sort of a general question, though I guess it may go back to what Salima was talking about mostly. By the way, thank you all. This was really fabulous. So what my question is that there seem to be a lot of these systemic barriers to implementation and to success, especially in how budgets are handled and how planning and land use are handled, and that those are still going to exist under a new plan. And I was wondering, what could be done about that theoretically at either the government level or with civil society, or is there any contribution philanthropy can make? So just an example, and this is, of course, different context, different scale. In New York City, nonprofits are usually the agents of the government in delivering social service, and they all complain about how long it takes to get government budgets. So a number of mechanisms have evolved over the past decades to provide, let's say, bridge loans to these organizations while they're waiting for government funding. I'm not saying that this would work in the Israeli context, but might something like it work? At the same level, are there interventions in the field of planning in general that can help to remove some of the barriers that we may face in the future? Thanks.
Should we take 2 questions at a time to make it faster? Anybody else in the room? If not, I will ask Ilan's question to Ofer. Regarding the point you've mentioned concerning the de facto budget reduction public transportation, can you elaborate about the possible consequences in access to health, education, employment? And then a third question, we'll bundle them from Batya. Does the extension include additional current year funds for informal education? So I think both questions go to Salima and Ofer. Mudir, I don't know how familiar you are with bridge funds or these implications. Salima, do you have thoughts about bridge mechanisms and the additional current year funds for informal education?
I will start with the question about the funds for informal education. The answer is yes. It's not with the extension. It's actually this fund was improved for this the year. It's not the 2021 budget, but it's it was improved with the it's the school year. It's not the you know what I mean. It's the Tash'ab. It's the year that's starting from September 20 up until the June next year, and this fund it does exist. We need to work for the fund for the next school year that starts at September 2021. Okay, and before answering Alan's question, I would like to also respond to what Ofer said about the issue of public transportation at the extension, and it was really accurate. I would say that, and it's indeed that at the 922, actually the government resolution instructed the Ministry of Public Transportation to allocate 100 million shekels or 40% of the budgets for service additions. And in the extension, we just removed the 100 million and stayed just with the rate. The reason for that is that at 2020, actually, the whole budget for actually new services was 100 million. The whole budget that the Ministry of Transportation got from the Ministry of Finance was 100 million. So they had actually to allocate all of the money they have for this issue for the Arab communities, and they couldn't make it. They couldn't make it because they have to actually they have needs also in Jewish towns, and that's why they asked us to actually make this change in the extension, because they are really intending to implement the resolution, and they don't want to be in a situation where they have to allocate 100 million and just can't make it. The rationale of 40% or 100 million was built on the fact that the yearly budget for the Ministry of Public Transportation for this thing is 250 million every year. And so 40% and 100 million makes the same budget for the Arab municipalities. And because this year was really different because of the fact that the government budget was not approved, they only got 100 million, and they faced this problem, and that's why this change happened in the extension. I'm gonna say a few words to Alan's question. Well, I think that actually we are facing the same barriers every year, and it's actually happening more and more, but I don't think that we are in a vicious circle. I see that we are moving in a spiral way. We are making a process, but it's not like a line that is clear towards the solution. Every year we are wiser, and the openness that we have now in the ministries is much wider than what we had 5 years ago. I happen to be the one who led the negotiations for the extension, and I can see that when we spoke to the Ministry of Finance about the changes that we want to do in the housing section, same people were much more open to hear about these issues than they were 5 years ago. So I believe that we are making the progress. It's not easy, and we're making it in such a way that we are moving in the pace that is appropriate for each and every ministry and also local authorities. I can say that with the Mudir Younis and the committee, we have a much better cooperation now than we had 5 years ago, and it's from both sides. We are more open, and they are also more precise with their needs, and they can actually see the points where the responsibility is on the local authorities and the points where the responsibility is on the ministries. We're making a process, and it takes time, but I believe that we are on the right way.
Thank you. I want to turn to Ofer and Mudir to respond to some of the questions about the municipal learning, and also to chime in to give a quick answer about Elon's question about the transportation impact on health, education, and employment. But there have been questions since then about municipalities struggling to submit proposals, RFPs, and have them rejected and sent back. And Ruth Salzman followed up asking about the learning curve with municipalities over time. I think, Salima, you spoke a little bit to the cooperation learning curve, but I wanted to ask each of you to speak about this. Ofer, do you want to begin? Because you were supposed to answer before.
I'm not sure I follow on the question. Who asked the question? I'm looking on the chat.
So there's two questions. One is about the reduction in public transportation budgets, and if you can elaborate about the possible consequences, health, education, and employment. And then there's questions about, and maybe you can be specific with housing in this case, although maybe see if you can generalize as well, how widespread it is that RFPs, proposals that plans that municipalities develop and submit to ministries are sent back. And Ruth Salzman asked more deeply tell us about the learning curve with municipal proposals over time. And
Okay, I can address to the issue of public transportation and also maybe in a general way to the field of housing, but I prefer to leave it to Mudir to answer the more specific question about relations between Arab local authorities and the government. I would say about public transportation that regarding its impact on health, services, employment, that already today the situation is not glorified. In many Arab towns, the coverage of public transportation is very minimal and reduced to the very central part of the cities, and many areas remain without coverage of public transportation. And this is improving gradually, as Salima has shown, but there is still a very big gap to close. And the consequence of the reduction of the budget means that the gap will be closed slower. And the rate in which more and more neighborhoods will get coverage of public transportation will take more time and more years. And of course, it has implication on the consumption of services, on the accessibility to employment and to universities and other things. I want to add maybe one comment to the issue of barriers in housing and planning. First of all, I agree with Salima that there is a spiral movement. It's not a vicious circle, and I think it can be divided into two kinds of barriers. One kind is professional barriers that stems from the fact that the planning institutions in Israel are not suited to address the specific needs of the Arab local authorities and the specific characteristics of the planning in Arab towns. And it's something that needs to be dealt with in very deep manner. And there are barriers in this manner that are solved gradually and over time, and over the implementation of 922. We saw some of those barriers being solved, and we were involved in it. And the other kind of barriers is barrier that stems from the relation of trust between the government and the Arab local authorities. And many times the people think about relation of trust, they think about the issue that the Arab local authority don't trust the government, but many times it's also the other way around. Many times the government and I'm not speaking specifically on you, Salima. I think you know it. Many times the government doesn't trust the Arab local authorities, and I think the area in which it has the greater magnitude is the area of housing and planning, because in this issue there is the field of unauthorized housing and the issue of enforcement, and the governments in many times try to condition budget for planning with action of enforcement by the Arab local authority, and in many times there is a need to just put more trust in the Arab local authorities and give more budgets for planning before expecting them to put sanctions of demolition and fines on those citizens. And this is something that also gradually happened, but there's still a long road to go.
There's a lot of there's so many levels to the question of the learning curve in that regard. When you start speaking about trust and the correct formation of the processes. I want to, because we're so short on time, we'd held on to 1:50, and I know it's a lot for people to go over an hour. I really want to invite Mudir to speak about how the capacities of local authorities to meet conditions and the learning curve over time, and perhaps the relationship between how budgets are designed, both to strengthen the local capacities and their ability to implement, and also to make sure that the budgets are designed to meet the realities on the ground.
If we are talking about the Arab municipalities, we understand we have to talk about they are weakened Arab municipalities. By finance, the budget is almost, we are saying that if you can help me with English, تعتمد Salima?
Depends on.
Depends, okay. It depends almost of the budget that we get from the government. Why is that? Because our budget from the taxes that we get from the citizen, it's only for housing. And when we're talking about housing, we are talking about two things. First of all, the tax is the tax from the housing is the lower tax. And the other thing that we are talking about a very weakened community that when they pay for the tax, it's very difficult for them to pay it, and the income from these taxes are it's very low. So therefore, we depends a lot about the government budget. What is happening right now, because we have the corona, for example, they make a compensation because everything was closed in Israel. So they have decided that we are going to give a compensation for the councils because there was, we closed everything. We couldn't get taxes and the compensation they give it for the lack of the taxes of the industry, for example. And for the merchandise תעסוקה, מסחר,
employment. Employment.
What's happening right now, because we have for all the Arab community, for all the Arab councils, we got 47 compensation, 47 million shekels for compensation from the outcome of I'm not mistaken, 2.82 billion shekels. It's approximately, it's about 1 or 2% from the compensation that we get from the whole compensation. When we are talking about 20% of the people, of the population. That what means? That means that the discrimination against the Arab community and the Arab Council, that there was no income or good income for these municipalities. They all depend about the budget of the government. And therefore, we are talking about these budgets. When we talk about the government, we heard Ofer that's talking about there is no trust on the Arab Council that they can make advantage of the budgets that they're given to them. But we believe that it's the wrong idea and it's a discriminated idea about the Arab Council. We have the capacity as a leader and as an employee in this side that we can make make advantage of these budgets and make it better. But when we have the proof that when they give the budget for housing planning and everything, we can see that we make a lot of progress. And this progress, you can't make it by the government, you make it by the council. Who make master plans and detailed plans, it's a council, the municipality council, it's not the government. So we seek to get this, for example, industry areas in order to make the Arab municipalities not weak and it doesn't depend about on the budget. By this way, we can make the change in our villages and our towns. We believe right now, unfortunately, we think that moving to achieve this is not, there's no decision to do that because we are fighting right now. If we want to make, for example, industrial area on Al-Fahim, one of our biggest towns, what's happening right now, and instead of take Al-Fahim as a pilot, instead of strengthening Al-Fahim, they made Harish. It's a small town that began 2,000 population citizens. And right now they're talking about more than 100,000. Now Harish is what we're talking about is a Jew town, started with 2,000, and in about 5 years we are talking about 100,000. And if we're talking about Wadi Arawaz, Ara, Fahana, we talk about 200,000 Arab communities, Arab citizens. So the decision is, they may talk about 92, they may talk about discrimination, but we still fight for the land, we still fight for the budget. And the idea that what's happening in the government, it's not always that we are going to make the change. They say it, but they do not really mean it. And if they mean it, it's not enough. From the capacity, some of the 922, there was a decision in order to strengthen the councils, the Arab councils. We have more budgets, for example, in the lack of engineering in the Arab councils. We have what we call Mawarid. Salima will talk about it. It's employee in order only that he also only talking about how to get budgets for the Arab councils and how to make advantage of these budgets. So we believe that the Arab councils and the leaders are ready. They can make the change, but still we're fighting to make the change in the mind of the government and who's sitting in the head of.
Thank you. So Mudir, I think, referenced many initiatives and issues that I think each can be a focus of an entire call, everything from resource integrator program to help local councils in the learning curve, in utilizing and implementing budgets, also in the issues with industrial zones, one of the areas where infrastructure barriers have been some of the greatest in 922, great potential to bring industrial zones, great barriers. And I think that this will also be addressed in some of the high-tech proposals we're looking that are being developed to be included in the next multi-year plan. We are way past time, so I want to thank everyone for coming. If you have additional questions, please send them to me and we will share them with our speakers. A really, really big thank you to Salima, to Mudir, to Ofer. These are very busy times, and we really appreciate both the content and the sticking to the times and how much rich information you shared with us. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'll see you at the annual meeting or the next peer call.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.